This is the Fantasy Roadshow.
We are live.
We are live, and your mic is hot, so be careful there. We are live. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Roadshow. This episode is brought to you by Rule 1 Proteins. If you don't know, now you know. Rule 1 Proteins is the best in the business. They got the best protein powder, the best supplements, the best vitamins. You name it, they got it. Go check them out at www.rule1proteins.com. The podcast is available on all platforms. Thanks for clicking on the video. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Check us out on all social media as well. You guys know the drill. My name is Truck, and I'm joined, as always, by Kulz and Shane O'Mac. Boys, how we doing? Shane, how's your day going? It's a beautiful Sunday today. How you doing?
Doing well. Got a belly full of pancakes in me, so it is doing very nice.
Were they peanut butter pancakes?
No peanut butter no peanut butter on it. Just some wheat chocolate chip pancakes. So
okay, all right. I can dig it. Kulz, how you doing over there, buddy?
Good. I just took my vitamins. I felt them in my pocket, so I should be pretty full of nutrients here soon.
Okay,
well.
all right. I like it.
I love the intro. That was such a good intro. I'm gonna pop a mid.
Ooh, okay. Well, that's not something I enjoy that you do, but go ahead. You do what you want. Today we are talking football injuries going into the season. There's a lot of question marks. Everybody knows about the Nick Chubb stuff, and Kirk Cousins coming back, Aaron Rodgers coming back. So we had a very prolific guest on today talking injuries, and he is the fantasy
recurring
doctor. Recurring guest. Yes, he was a very early guest early on the podcast. But Dr. Jesse Morse, he's a very respectable and reputable doctor in his field, and he loves talking fantasy sports. So he kind of gives us the rundown of what to expect going into the season. So
he's had a tweet featured on the Pat McAfee show, Truck's favorite show of all time.
He definitely has had a tweet featured on the Pat McAfee show. That is correct.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good interview. Excited for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of relevant conversations that, even for us who's dialed in year round, we have questions about, when Chubb is currently getting drafted in the 10th, 11th round. When can we expect him back on the field? Hockenson, one of the top 3 tight ends. Can we expect him to play? There's just so many fantasy relevant questions based on drafts have started. Underdog drafts are rolling. So we need answers to these questions, and the more information we have, the better off we'll be, which will just put us in a better spot once we get news towards training camp. So that's where you can find edge right now in these contests. So having him on, getting the scoop from somebody that actually knows what they're talking about is beneficial, and I'm excited for that. Hopefully, Shane O'Mac, you're going to update the Substack that you released last week, and that should have information of projected timelines based on Jesse Morse's opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that is in a very important piece. That's, I think, extremely valuable. So.
But in the spirit of us talking injuries, I think it's fitting for us to just talk about some of the most memorable injuries, sports-related injuries in our lifetime. So, Shane, I would imagine you have more injuries that you are aware of. Since you are a little bit older than us.
Opportunity to have more injuries is what you're saying.
So tell me about
you've had a longer slate of injury potential time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so tell me about the Joe Theismann injury and the leg. How was that when you watched it on TV? Was that pretty intense?
Man, that was just, the most memorable, intense thing.
Let's do top three. Top 3 off the top of your head, most memorable sports injuries. And it could be for any reason. It doesn't have to be it could have been a big moment in your life. It doesn't have to be the injury was,
So I'm gonna go with number 1 is my own personal injury. I was playing in the state championship high school tennis championships.
Flex.
State championship. Holy
Flex.
shit.
Against Andre Agassi.
So I was playing doubles, and I was up at the net, and I took an overhead right to the man parts. Direct hit. Just a smash right there from the guy at the net. I was down for probably a good 5 to 10 minutes. Guy came out and actually did a very specific stretch to help with the pain for that injury, which I'd never heard of before. So
a little groin stretch.
Yeah, something like that, So they
Was
got
there any
me over.
lubricant involved in this stretch?
There was not any lubricant.
Oh God!
But much like Willis Reed and the New York Knicks, I got up and I powered through the rest of the day. So made it through. They didn't have I didn't have a brace, no wrap up. It was
No protection.
Yeah, no
lube, no protection.
Yeah.
Did you really milk that injury with the country club tennis milfies? Were you telling that story for years to come?
I may have shared that, a couple of times.
It was right in this region right here.
Yeah, that's funny.
That's awesome.
So that's number one as far as my own personal one. So
Fair enough.
And then I would say, my next one, just because I'm a Cowboys fan and just because it really it took my hatred of the Philadelphia Eagles to a whole new level, was when Michael Irvin had his career ended at Philadelphia in the game. It was his neck injury, and the Eagles were cheering him on as he was getting carted off. The Eagles fans were cheering as he was carted off the field. So that it was the very last play of his career.
Yeah.
At the old Philadelphia Stadium.
Okay. Got any other ones?
Top two. All right.
Yeah,
Top two is fine. Top two is fine. I would say my top one, I was young. Gosh, I don't even remember what game this was. But I was at a Blackhawks game growing up, and there was a guy coming out of the penalty box, and as he was closing the penalty box, he got checked, and he got checked into the board, and his ear got caught in the penalty box as it was closing, and they showed on the Jumbotron of him skating up. There's blood everywhere, and his ear was just like dangling on his face. And that was pretty gruesome. I'll have to ask my dad if he remembers what game that was, but that was pretty gnarly. I remember that, as I didn't think anyone would.
Yeah.
Number two is probably like that Kevin Ware Louisville one.
Yeah.
That was just gross. And I'd say those are the top two for me off the top of my head. We'll go with top two. I'll be top two.
Okay. Yeah. My top two, I'll go with two and then one. Johnny Knox. Do you guys remember Johnny Knox getting absolutely folded on the sideline for the Chicago Bears, the wide receiver?
No.
He stopped playing after that. He was coming down the sideline and somebody hit him. I can't remember who it was, but he looked like his back just snapped. Like he just got completely folded. And I remember that being an absolutely gruesome injury for the Bears. And I mean, he was one of those fast receivers that we were really excited about early on. But yeah, that one's one of the most memorable for me. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention Derrick Rose, the one that could have been Derrick Rose. There's still a place in my heart for D Rose, and that was probably one of the most devastating injuries in Chicago sports history. I would say that was bad. So those are my top two.
I'm glad that D Rose was number two to Johnny Knox.
No. Johnny Knox was two, and then number one was D Rose. So
we're gonna pretend like it was flipped.
Yeah, no, definitely not flipped. D Rose, that was tough.
All right.
But yeah, so we hope you guys enjoyed the interview, and
Oh, that is so perfect. All right, ladies and gents, Dr. Jesse Morse is coming right up.
So buckle.
So buckle the truck up. Wait. Listen, this is going to be good. We're keeping all of this. We're keeping this. It's all good, bro. We introduced Jesse Morse.
Everybody enjoy the interview with Dr.
Enjoy
Jesse
the
Morse,
interview.
you jag off.
All right, here we are. We've Dr. Jesse Morse on today. Welcome to the Fantasy Roadshow. We're doing a quick interview, talking off-season injury update. Dr. Jesse Morse had him on when we first started the podcast. He is sports and family medicine physician, host of Eternal Vitality podcast. You can find him at Dr. Jesse Morse. Dr. Jesse, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you very much. Sweating my butt off down here in Miami. So,
yeah, it seems like summer started a little early here in Austin, Texas as well. We're getting, we had a heat bubble, I think is what they called it. And it's been 100 a few times. So I imagine you're feeling that as well.
yeah, it's humid as hell here. That's the problem. So it's like 90 to 100, but the humidity is like 92. So you're like,
Yeah. Well, we wanted, we know you're a busy man and wanted to hop on here a little early off season talk. Best Ball Mania Underdog, they opened up there. So we have drafts going on and we want to just know where to draft some of the guys. What can we expect a potential window for some of these guys with drafts going? We want to try to provide a little bit of analysis on, injury expectations. So I said, let's jump right in. Nick Chubb, I think, is a huge conversation piece here. So
very much so.
What can we expect? Is there even a window of expectations with Nick Chubb?
Yeah. So Chubb had super gnarly injury, if you remember it. That crazy, almost looked like a shelf. And his surgery was complicated. His tear was complicated. He tore his ACL and a bunch of other stuff. But I think he's got a couple things going for him. This is the only time he's tore his ACL. He had a significant injury in the same knee when he was in college. You can see that photo. That's an insane photo too. But he did not tear his ACL the first time. So he had that going for him and he bounced back and became the player we love and know. This one's going to be a little bit harder, but I still think he'll bounce back and look pretty good. They added more offense. I think they should be better this year, maybe. Watson had a pretty tough injury in his own. I think realistically we can expect about 85% for Chubb. I think would be like max for year one or this year. He's getting a little older, but I still think he can do the majority of what he did. I don't know if we'll ever see him back to pre-injury. He may be 95% or something, but these guys start to lose a little every year, maybe after 25 or 26. And then this is a big injury. Like the only one the past 15 years that has really defied the odds for a running back coming back post ACL was last year in Breece Hall. And that was only because he was getting crazy volume at the end of the year, like super, not even normal volume. Chubb's not going to get that. That's not something that's going to happen. So, maybe they give him 10 touches, 12, something like that. A couple passes, maybe. You're right now, I love the talent, but I don't know what his ADP is or anything. But, is it possible he starts on the pup? Possible. I think he should be good to go week one. I really don't have a whole lot of concerns for him.
Oh, wow. So when I hear Chubb and you say 85%, like Chubb, a lot of his production came with a heavy workload. So, you could almost directly correlate like 85% right into the workload, right? Like I think those almost go like hand in hand. So it'll be interesting. He's getting to that age as a running back, I think he's one of those guys, if we didn't see this knee injury, he seems to be pretty durable. The way he runs the ball is just kind of a great runner. But again, it's the workload which made him such an attractive first 3-round dynasty draft asset. I think he's going in like round 9 or 10. So that's where it becomes interesting. It's like if he's going to be on the field week 1, I probably want him at 9 or 10. If he is going to be on the pup, maybe I'd fade him. So I don't know. We'll have to.
As my RB2.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, if you're doing a complete 0 RB, which worked out really well last year for most people, I think he's a ridiculous, running back 1 with a stacked lineup if that's the route you're going. If he's your RB1 on not a 0 RB team, I think you're going to have a little bit more issues, especially if they start off really slow. Think of what happened to Javonte Williams last year. Didn't exactly start off pretty hot. Tweaked I think it was his hip. So, I still think he's good. There's a lot of time for him to injure something, but I'm not overly expecting that. I just think that if he's requiring volume, I think they're going to throw a lot more. Now they have even more weapons. So is he going to get the volume that you want to justify him being a top 5 or top 10 running back? Unless he scores 20 touchdowns, probably not.
Yeah, maybe just like some touchdown upside there is what he becomes, is like, never not having these 150, 200-yard games anymore, and he's going to be like a touchdown-dependent start almost.
Yeah.
And they've kind of covered themselves in case he's not ready for those first 6 weeks with the Deonta Foreman signing. They brought over, so they've got a little coverage there just in case. It's an indication maybe. They've covered themselves if he does have to start on the PUP list. The second guy I wanted to talk to you about is J.K. Dobbins. So, he's had that Achilles tendon tear. The positive was it happened during week 1 of last year. Second positive is he's going to a team that has a need for running backs with only Gus Edwards as the only other running back on the roster right now. But this is a guy you can't ignore his past history. He's had ACL tears, has had meniscus work, LCL tears. How much do those past injuries kind of factor into your timeline of him coming and playing this year?
So I thought it was kind of funny that I looked at the depth chart for the Chargers. I'm like, wait, isn't that the same as it was last year for the Ravens? I'm like, what the hell just happened? They just switch? Let's do a package deal. But so here's my biggest issue with Dobbins. Love the talent pre all the injuries, right? The poor guy can't catch a break. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever see his true talent. And he'll probably admit that too. If you were to pick one injury to any position that is absolutely devastating, it's an Achilles tear for a running back. That's it. Why? Because you need your Achilles for explosiveness. And you need to be able to recoil very quickly. Think about what they're doing. They step. They're trying to create a new angle. They step. They pivot. They step this way. They around this guy, pivot, and then they try to burst. Unfortunately, with a reconstruction, that becomes very difficult. So, I can list you 5 or 6 guys that have all had Achilles reconstructions, and all of them have been awful, absolutely awful in their first couple of years back. It took Deonta Foreman 4 years to come back. 4 years. So it's like we were talking about right now in 29. That's what, think about that. That's how crazy that is. Cam Akers, James Robinson, remember him?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Went from amazing to 3 teams and not relevant.
Mm-hmm.
You had the only one that was Justice Hill. He was okay, but he wasn't like killing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the prop. Marlon Mack tore twice. He tore the first time, and he either retore it or tore the opposite side. I don't think we ever confirmed that. And then Tariq Cohen, who just signed the other day, also had the ACL and then the Achilles, which is not common, which is weird how they both did it. I understand the depth chart is what it is. I understand they probably want to run the ball given Harbaugh's history. What I know about this injury and what the data shows, it's ugly. Maybe you kick the tires at like around like 12 or 15 or something, but there's probably someone on that board that I'm going to want over him. So I'll be astonished if I have any of him this year.
Yep. And you nailed his ADP. It's right at like 13/14.
Yeah. I mean, and I think he'll probably start. He'll probably start week 1 to be available week 1. The problem is that stupid tendon it doesn't cooperate like you want it to. You know, we'll probably talk about the quarterbacks that suffer this, which is also weird. They won't have as much issues, but they're also not trying to create space and distance and run and cut. And it's a different monster. You have to think about it. The only other position that sucks as much as running back for Achilles tears is defensive end or tight, DT, whatever you want to call them. Those guys, because think about what they're doing. They're trying to create that burst. Yeah. Can't do it. You cannot do it. And that Achilles tendon is supposed to be under tension. And the problem is if you rehab too quickly, it becomes very loose and you lose that tension and that's it. You can never get it back. You have to surgically repair it, which is usually a career ender. That's what happened to Olivier Vernon.
Interesting. While we're talking about the Achilles, let's just jump right in. I think we could probably knock these two out with Rodgers and Cousins. You mentioned that you just mentioned them a little bit there. So we could probably, correct me if I'm wrong, we could probably include those two together.
Yeah. They're very similar. The timing was different. I think the difference between the two is both of them were really Ironmen. If you look at it, Cousins hadn't missed a freaking game, maybe one game, but I think it was probably like a week 17 or whatever, since his time in like Washington, like way back. So like the dude was an Ironman. For Rodgers, basically the same thing. He really had a bunch of missed time with he injured one clavicle and then he fractured the other one a couple years later. That was like really his only time that he missed. He didn't miss a whole lot of time. But unfortunately, each of them tore their Achilles. Now, the important thing for this is that Rodgers tore his front leg Achilles. Cousins tore his back leg Achilles. So in my head, both being right hand throws. In my head, Rodgers probably could have came back early because that front leg is just placing. He's not expected to scramble or whatever. The back leg is a different monster. Think about how awful Joe Burrow was when he was trying to push off on that calf strain early in 24 or 3. Yeah. He couldn't throw the deep ball. He struggled with accuracy because he couldn't push off from that rear leg. Mm-hmm. The problem with an Achilles tear on the power or backside is that you never get the same size or strength back in that calf. And I'm sure he'll probably figure it out. But, he's going to have to try to throw harder, in my opinion. And it'll be interesting to see if that translates because he might not be able to put as much leg work into it. And he's got a later timeline. He's lagged by a couple months. I don't know exactly how long it was, but probably 6 or 8 weeks if I were to guess. Yep. I think both will be relevant. I think Rodgers has sneaky potential, with Wilson and Malachi and the tight end. Can't think of his name. We'll see about Williams. Yeah, and Conklin. And then Brees, obviously. So now I think Cousins becomes a little bit different. He has an embarrassment of riches in terms of talent, right? He's got Pitts, who should have broken out by now for whatever reason he hasn't. Bijan could land on another planet this year. You have Drake, who could finish in the top 10, depending on who you ask. And they have some depth or whatnot. It'll be interesting to see if they throw as much as they used to, or he's used to. Remember, they didn't run the ball a whole lot in Minnesota. Is he going to be able to throw it as much and as accurate as he did with Minnesota? Or is Bijan going to get a decent amount of work, which is going to take a lot of stress off Kirk, but that doesn't really help you for Kirk? right, from a fantasy perspective. So he's definitely not someone I'm particularly targeting much. I think Rodgers is a little bit of a sexier play per se. I don't know what their ADPs are, but I'm not really interested in either of them, to be honest with you. But if I had to pick, I'd probably pick Rodgers.
They're going to be healthy week 1.
Yeah, I'm not. Rodgers. There was video. I don't know if it was today or yesterday. It looked like he was fixing something. Initially, when I looked at it quick this morning, I thought it was his Achilles leg, but it wasn't. It was his healthy leg. Yeah, it was probably nothing. It's just the wear and tear. Dude's 40. I mean, he's got wear and tear of his calf or foot or whatever. So it's just like, all right, whatever. The odds of injuring something are very, very low. I'm not overly worried about either of them tweaking or injuring it. They might not ever get their true explosiveness back, but they're really not explosive per se anyway. So it's not, there's only 2 quarterbacks that I could find that have ever tore their Achilles. One is Dan Marino, and 2 is Vinny Testaverde. That's it. If there's others, maybe I missed it, but and both ended up. Marino played for like 4 or 5 more years, I think, so it wasn't a big deal to him.
So I want to touch upon a couple of tight ends as we look at right now in drafts. And one, I'm just start with the most severe injury, the latest injury, and that was TJ Hockenson. That was an ACL and MCL. And I think that the surgery wasn't, at least on one of them, wasn't until late January.
Yeah.
Is this a prime, in your mind, do you think this is a prime candidate for a guy that starts on the PUP list?
I'll be surprised if he doesn't. Yeah, if there's anybody fantasy relevant, I'll say. I don't really consider Dobbins in them to be fantasy relevant. But fantasy relevant meaning top 5, top 10 of their position to start on PUP or to have issues with this 2023 injury, it's Hockenson. Because the time, not only the injury, but also the timing of the injury. It couldn't have been at a worse time. And the problem is he had a complicated knee injury, so it was not straightforward. And now if you add, we'll say best case scenario, he returns in 9 months. You're already missing a month or 6 weeks of the season. So where are you going to have to draft him to justify missing the first 6 weeks of the season? Can you snag him and grab, Otten or Conklin or something like that to hold you down while Hawkinson's on the mend? And then when he comes back, how does he look? And who's the quarterback? How's that playing out there in Minnesota? So some concerns with that, unfortunately. I don't think we'll see him as 100% until 25, unfortunately.
Yeah, we actually just had a dynasty, our first ever listener league for dynasty, and he fell because of the injury in dynasty, and I went ahead and grabbed him and then did exactly what you said. From a dynasty standpoint, I still think he has a great career, and then I got a Otten or a Hunter Henry to kind of stagger the first part of the season and take away some of that risk. But I'm staying away from him in best ball as of right now and in redraft because I think he's still like in rounds 8 around there.
Yeah.
I don't want a guy in round 8 who's not playing till week 8 or 9, and then it takes 3 weeks to ramp up. Now we're already in playoffs. That's just a little bit too much.
And he could have a setback, right? I mean, unfortunately, that's the nature of this injury. These injuries, they're complicated. They have setbacks. We saw Ertz a couple years ago. He did okay. Max Williams wasn't really relevant per se. So there's not many tight ends that come to the top of my head that had ACLs. So you really don't have a good reference. But I'm not going to put it past him that he can't obviously come back. It's just I don't think he'll come back as quickly as you would like him to.
Yeah. What about Andrews? That was like a pretty disappointing injury late in the season. It was tough to see that for Andrews, what he overcame, started to look like himself, and then goes down. Tell us about that injury and then what this rehab, what can we expect? Yeah,
so off the top of my head, he had that hip drop tackle, and it kind of landed, and then he kind of it was kind of like a side twist, and he fractured. I don't think they ever confirmed it, but they fractured his lower ankle or lower leg, basically where it meets the ankle, and then likely suffered a high ankle with it. That's a tough injury to come back from initially. Now I'm not overly worried about him. He's fine. But in terms of initially, that's like a 10 to 12 week injury. That's not a quick thing to come back from. So unless he happened to suffer it like preseason or something, the odds that just was going to derail the season, and it is what it is. Likely stepped up, hit or miss. It would be interesting to see if they run 2 wide receiver sets or tight end sets with them. But I'm not super concerned about this injury. I think he'll kind of pick up where he left off, and maybe depending on his value, where he's at, maybe he's a value.
Yeah. Let's talk about Kyren Williams. We saw that he is going to miss camp with a foot injury. I know the foot could be really, there's so much going on there. It could be pretty difficult thing. So just break down for us the foot in general, and then in Kyren's case, I know there's a little bit of history there. What are we looking at here? Is there concern for missed time? Is it just you need to keep him off his feet?
Unfortunately, Kyren struggled with injuries. He had a Jones fracture, which is the pinky, this one right here. I want to say it was his rookie season. And then he had a bad high ankle. I think it was his second season. And then he had a high ankle last year. I think this was his third season, if I remember correctly. But he's had multiple lower extremity injuries, so I'll put it that way. Now we hear about a new foot injury. We don't have any context. That's literally all we know. Yeah. So could it be another Jones? Could he have fractured his old Jones? It's possible. Not super common, but it's possible. Could he have suffered a midfoot sprain? Liz Frank. Yes. That's what Najee had, a bad version. That's what I think they would have mentioned if it was bad, but that's what Etienne had when he missed his whole rookie season. And then you have just some stupid random stuff that can happen that's not overly concerning. The only caveat to that is I would say turf toe sucks. So I would not, if it's turf toe, it's Antonio Gibson's career kind of has waned because of this injury. I think in his first or second season, he had a really bad one, injured it again, missed a bunch more games, and eventually had surgery before his next season, but it wasn't until friggin' July or something really late. And then he re-injured it again that season. So these can be frustrating. So if it's a turf toe, which is basically injury to this big toe, the big joint, that would be a little annoying, but I'm not ready to freak out. They fed him like crazy. Corum's there. It'll be interesting to see if he's legit or not. It seems like he is. But, I'll buy the dip, if it was me. I'm not, until I hear more. Right now, the timing doesn't mean a whole lot for me. If this was August, okay, it's a different story. Now this is important because you're running out of time and your re-injury risk is higher. It's still May. Did he tweak it and just missing a week or two of spring camp? Okay, fine.
The other running back we wanted to get your thoughts on that's having some issues right now is Josh Jacobs with the Packers with some hamstring issues. And, we saw last year this linger in and affect people like Cooper Kupp and affect people like Christian Watson. So for those that are doing best ball drafts now, is this something, even though we're so early in the summer, is this something, though, that maybe you have to take into account and lower a round or so drafting him?
So Jacobs has got some decent volume on him. Not a ton, but some decent volume. He's had his fair share of injuries. He plays through injuries. He doesn't mind playing through injuries. Now he's with Green Bay, and I think that becomes interesting because they never would commit to Aaron Jones. Ever. They would not commit to him. They gave him every chance, and they still brought in Dylan, who was awful. Awful. And it's and Aaron Jones was like walking on water. He couldn't, not last year. Last year he struggled with his own hamstring injuries. So I just think there's going to be a committee here, and I have a feeling that it doesn't take a whole lot. And who's Lloyd, I think, is the kid they drafted. So if there's a guy, we pump the brakes on, it's probably him. There's an old school theory, you guys may or may not remember it, called the curse of 365, where you get anybody who rushed over 365 times in the previous year had a tendency to struggle the year after. There was some guys that, broke that, LaDainian Tomlinson and Emmett. There's a couple guys who were freaks and kind of didn't follow that rule. But a lot of the guys, awful the year after. And if I remember correctly, Jacobs hit that threshold 2 years ago and didn't have the best season last year. Right. So, and I think Derrick Henry's kind of a freak and he's a little bit of an anomaly, but I don't think there's really anyone else like him. So I'm a little weary of Jacobs, and there's plenty of other sexier names that I'll look for as opposed to him.
There's two quarterbacks. I know we only got a couple minutes left here with you. The two quarterbacks here. One, Joe Burrow. I want to hear about what's going on with that wrist, and then the following one is Anthony Richardson. I just want to hear from your perspective, the way that he plays football. Do we have to be concerned about injuries his entire career? Just give us from coming from a sports medicine doctor watching him play football, what do we know?
He's fun to watch, but friggin', hey, he scares the hell out of me. So realistically, I do have some concerns about Richardson's reckless behavior, whatever you want to call it. I love him as a player. He reminds me of a Josh Allen kind of player, right? But I think he just makes some poor choices. Hey, should I run for this or should I just throw it away? Sometimes, I grew up in New England and I watch Brady throw the ball every friggin' way all the time. And I'm like, why is he doing that? And now I see people who don't do that. And I'm like, why are they doing that and not throwing it away? So I finally understand it. He's young. He's ridiculously talented. I don't think there's a question there. And he's got a cannon. I'm not really worried about the shoulder injury. He's fully cleared and fine. He has had an increased risk of re-injury, but not enough to be wary. Could he finish as the QB1? No question. Do I have if you said, hey, Anthony Richardson just left the game with a trainer, would I be surprised? No. He played 3.5 games. He missed one game with a concussion and he had two other injuries that we haven't talked about yet. So it's he's had a ton of injuries and he's only, if you look at his injury history, it's ridiculous. There's 10 injuries on it and he's 23, whatever he ages. So he's got he tore his meniscus dancing, weird shit. and it's just some guys just unfortunately have, bad luck, bad genetics, whatever it is. So he may be one of them. I don't mind passing on him because he's going to be expensive. If there was a discount, okay, different discussion, but I don't think he's going to be a discount. Joe Burrow is a different story. So I caught a lot of heat from this earlier in the offseason. The issue with Joe Burrow, initially we thought, maybe it's what we call a TFCC, which is on the pinky side. It's kind of what we use to turn a doorknob, that motion. Annoying, but not, a big deal. It unfortunately wasn't that, or at least that wasn't the primary injury. He suffered what we call a scapholunate, which is on the thumb side. This is a huge deal. Why? Because this stabilizes everything over here. This is everything right here. Here's the other problem. We do not have any other quarterback that has ever suffered this injury. We have no references. This is an N of 1. We don't know. We have no idea. Could he throw and be completely fine? Yes. Could he reach and re-injure it reaching out? Yes. That enough is just enough to scare me away. He's not much of a runner, loaded with talent around him, assuming Higgins is back. But, he has to be perfect to finish in the top 8, in my opinion, right? Wrist can't bother him, can't have a calf. Everything has to be really good. I'd rather have someone who's cheaper and probably has similar upside. As much as I hate Tua, I'd probably be, that type of thing. So I think that the wrist is more of an unknown. But look at Joe's injury history. ACL with a crazy, multiple level injury. Had the calf last early August. That lingered for felt like half the season. He had another injury a couple of years ago. Now he's got this new weird wrist thing. So it's like, are we ever going to see a good, healthy season from him? Is his ADP baked into a discount? I don't think so. What do you guys think?
I have an LSU headman on. He brought me a championship in 2019, so I'm not going to say anything bad about him. I'll pass it over to Shane.
No, whenever I evaluate him from a fantasy perspective, there's like a history. Like he starts off the year slow, right? Every year, it's like about 4 games to get going.
Yeah.
So I usually am avoiding him. Now this year, if I'm seeing him now slip into round 5, which I think his ADP is at right now, that's a spot where I feel a little bit more comfortable taking him. But there is a just strong history of that first month of the season, just odd stuff that has happened.
And then you add these fluky injuries, you're like, is that enough to turn me away from him? I love him as a player. I love him as who he is, but for being unbiased from a fantasy perspective, that's kind of, I get it. I get it, but.
So as someone who's done like 20 drafts now with Underdog and Best Ball Mania, from what I heard you say there with Burrow, where he's getting drafted, you want someone with higher upside like Tua. The person that came to my head is Caleb Williams. I want to hear what you think about him, because his upside to me, he's got rushing upside and he's got ridiculous talent around him. So if his arm is what the scouts think it is, his ceiling is top 5, top 3, So
I think it'll be interesting if he manages top 8, I wouldn't say shocked, but I'll be really impressed. Everything would have to go freaking perfect. But I think, which is rare, right? How many quarterbacks get dropped into what the hell he has? It's like silly. So it's like he doesn't even really have to go bananas. He just has to get the ball to his guys and they have to go to work. It's not like he has a bunch of scrubs around him and he has to make magic. That just makes it a lot harder. So I think it'll be interesting if you're looking for a high upside. I don't know if you're going to find someone much higher than him, maybe Jaden, but I think you're going to pay for that. But in general, I think it'll be interesting. I'm curious to see what happens with Daniel Jones this year. He's kind of a sneaky, runs a decent amount. Again, I don't know if he will, but he's got a little bit more playmakers. We don't know what's going on with Waller, but it's kind of a moot point. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. He's kind of another guy. You're like, maybe he's decent. He's probably pretty cheap.
Yeah, he's QB 30 right now.
Yes. I don't think you get much cheaper.
That's
Matt Jones might be cheaper.
Yeah, I was talking to Truck, our other co-host, today doing a draft, and I was like, man, like these best ball drafts are all about finding where is the value, and unfortunately, it's on players who burned the public a lot last year, and that's Daniel Jones. He's 2 seasons away from a top 10 season. He has Dable, who is a great quarterback coach. As his coach, he just got a wide receiver 1 for the first time since maybe in his entire career. And he's quarterback 30. There's not a lot of risk there. You can take him in the 17th round. So I completely agree with you on DJ.
I've never been into best ball. I don't know why. I just can't do it. I like to manage my team, and I can't do a set and forget it. I get bored. I get the itch. I get that. I understand that. But it's interesting if you probably analyze your teams throughout the year or when you drafted, you'll see the trends change, right? It's like, oh, I got this guy in round 30 or whatever, or QB 30, and now he's QB 20 or whatever. So that may be 10 rounds, that may be 4 rounds, whatever it comes out. But it's interesting to see as injuries happen, as more information comes out, as whatnot, things change, right? So that part of it is cool because you kind of get a little bit of a steal, like, I got a good deal on him there. So that part of it is cool. The problem for me doing injuries is like I don't ever have a break if I'm doing that. It's like shit never ends. So I need like 4 months off. So that's the trouble part of trying to create content for injury. In terms of best ball, it's just like I need to catch up and I need to relax because the season is crazy.
Yeah, we're gonna have a piece of content that I'm gonna be putting out weekly as you're talking about these positional rank shifts. What is media like? Basically, I'm going to be assessing, like, breaking down why did Jalen Hyatt jump from wide receiver 61 to wide receiver 55. If that shift happens in a week, I'm going to break down why that happened and if it's legitimate or not. You know what I mean? So I basically exactly what you're saying with those, with that shift, and just kind of like, why did this happen? So that's something
I think that's cool.
Yeah. Well, hey, Dr. Jesse, it's always a pleasure, recurring guest. It's always great talking to you. Learn a lot every time, and it's just, great to connect and see how things are going down in Miami and get a piece of your brain from an injury standpoint, but also, we learned that we're on the same page with Daniel Jones, and love that.
Well, thank you for having me. I have so I was one of the main contributing people in the Fantasy Doctors. We've closed that. I just shut that down for unexpected circumstances, but I'm starting a new endeavor that should launch in the next couple of weeks.
Oh.
That will be very similar, a little bit prettier, so to speak. And I'll have some blurbs kind of like this, but maybe a little bit more comprehensive about, I wouldn't say every player you're going to draft, but the important ones, and especially the ones that had injuries. So that'll be, I'll start chipping away at that coming out in the next maybe 2-3 weeks or so. So you can check that out. And then I have a crazy injury history search engine that I came up with, that you can look like, hey, which running backs suffered high ankle sprains in 2023, and it will spit out all the ones. Or you could say, like, from this date to this date, which New York Giants got injured, and it will pop up like which ones got injured. Like, I made it pretty gnarly. So I'm still playing with that. But that'll be cool. So there's some cool things that we can potentially do with it, or people that are good with stats can do with it. So I think it'll be cool. Just another tool in our tool belt.
Awesome. Well, we thank you again so much. We're going to keep an eye out for that. Shoot it over once that goes live, and we'll blast it out to our fan base, the Roadies. But yeah, man, appreciate it. Always a pleasure to have you on, and hopefully you get back on the Pat McAfee show. I saw you had a.
I haven't got back. I haven't formally got on there yet. I'm working on it, but we'll see.
Yeah, I have a feeling that's coming.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool. It's funny because I usually have to hop out of clinic to do the Jason Brown show. And the timing of everything. So I've actually at some point in time I have to block spaces in my patient schedule to coordinate stuff. But we'll see. But yeah, we'll see. I'm hoping for another successful year.
Yeah, awesome. Well, best of luck, and we're always rooting for you. We'll blast your stuff out. So appreciate you, and everyone knows what to do. Buckle up.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, that was the interview with Dr. Jesse Morse. That was a great interview. I'm sad that I was not able to be there for that interview. I would have loved to talk to Dr. Jesse Morse, but I think you guys covered everything that needed to be covered. Talking about all the players that are relevant for injury updates going into the season. So let's kind of discuss some takeaways we got from that interview. I'll go ahead and start. One of the most interesting things I found from what he was talking about was the difference between Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers' Achilles injuries. So when he was talking about how Kirk Cousins is his back foot and Aaron Rodgers is his front foot. So he's more confident in Aaron Rodgers because he doesn't have to create that power off his back foot. That explosiveness is what he referred to it as. And I found that interesting. I wasn't aware of that going into this season. I was very high on Kirk Cousins, and that gave me a little pause. But I know that he's ultimately not too worried about Kirk Cousins, so I don't want to look too much into it. But I did find that very interesting that that was his back foot, and he needs to create some explosiveness in his throws. So I don't know. Did you guys find that interesting at all?
Yeah. But I don't think it's that I don't think it's that relevant. I wouldn't be worried about. I'm not hesitant to draft Cousins because of that information.
Okay.
He's had a full rehab, so like, yeah, inevitably that's where your power is gonna come from throwing the ball, but he's gonna be healthy. As Morse said, is like Rodgers and Cousins are both healthy. That's just the difference in their injury. So I'm not concerned about I would if you're bullish on him and his weapons in Atlanta, then go ahead and draft him. I wouldn't hesitate drafting him because of it.
Okay. What about you, Shane?
Yeah, the only thing I thought was interesting is he had, he brought up that, it was similar. I think it was Burrow he had mentioned as a comp, like when he was returning from his, there wasn't as much. There was a little bit of effect on some of his throws and deep throws at the beginning.
No, I don't think what he said about Burrow is that he had a calf strain. Like, remember when he tweaked his calf? I don't think he was mentioned. I don't think he brought up the injury, did he?
Well, he was just comparing it to it's the same thing as far as that push off. And so he thought there could be a little bit of concern as far as at the beginning, the velocity of his throws.
Yeah.
But
he's had a full rehab. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what he was saying was when Burrow tried to play through that calf strain and he was fucking hobbling around on his back foot, he wasn't able to create that explosiveness you need to have those deep throws. But Cousins, he's going to have months to work through that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying let's not buy too much stock in that. Yes, that's the process of healing that injury, but you would think hopefully by the time week 1 comes along, he's had months of throwing on it. He's worked through all of that, the kinks into getting that strengthened and confident. They're not going to throw him out there on a hobbled leg like Burrow, right? You just paid the guy $120 million or whatever. Was it more than that?
I don't know. I think 120 sounds right, but it could have been more.
Yeah, whatever. I just want to clarify that part because I think that's very relevant. When did Cousins go down a little bit 6 weeks later than Rodgers?
6 or 7, yeah. I think
but regardless, he's going to be fully healthy, and that's what Morse said is I'm confident in these guys being fully healthy. This is just the difference in the injury. So that's it was not great to hear, but it's not something to put. It's not a deal breaker, right? I don't think anyone should view it that way. And then in terms of he's going to be out there if he's 100%. I think we've already seen him making some throws. So he's been throwing on that, and it's May. I don't know how long he's been throwing on it, but we've got until September.
No, that's very true. The clips that I've seen from him in OTAs, the throws look good, and he doesn't look any different than he did. So that's a very good point.
He's not getting manicures middle of OTAs. He's not self-manicuring his feet in the middle of practice like Rodgers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think my biggest takeaway was Chubb. I was shocked. I was that almost broke my brain. And it's I don't even know if I trust it still. Truck and I have been drafting a lot of Chubb really since the Morse episode, because he says that he will be fully healthy week 1.
Week 1.
Well, he'll be playing week 1 at 85%. I would have said, gun to my head, he's going on the pup. Maybe he gets a few carries from week 6 to 8. This, I would have put him. My brain would have put him on the Hockenson schedule, just because of how gruesome the injury was. Because he's a running back, and obviously a leg injury to running back could be detrimental. His age, his mileage. I would have put him on a Hockenson type timeline. So to hear that he's going to be ready week 1 from a fucking sports medicine doctor broke my brain. And of course, as he mentioned, he may not be full workload week 1, but I don't care if he's getting 10 carries week 1, 15 by week 3, 20 by week, if he's on the field, especially in a best ball format, but like where his ADP currently has him, I think there's a lot of people like myself who have that dramatic timeline in their head.
Mm-hmm.
Chubb to me is the type of running back, the style of running back that a knee injury is not great, but he's going to get back on the field and play good football in a good offense with a good line. You know what I mean? That's just he's almost got that Frank Gore in him. I made that comparison pre-injury so much that I could see Chubb being a Frank Gore that just you're always saying, when is this guy not going to stop? And he just doesn't,
Yeah.
That was mind-blowing. Truck and I have literally got him in, I think, every draft since then.
Well, when we're looking at that pocket of where he's being drafted at, if he actually is playing week 1, that is a no-brainer pick. The value at which he's being drafted is so drastic that, if he's there week 1, find his ADP. Yeah. I think you said round 10 or 11 earlier, but
that was a guess.
Okay.
He is 115.5. So round 10.
Yeah.
Round 10 exactly. Early round 10. I think if he's playing week 1, if there's not even playing week 1, if we get to camp and it's Chubb is on the field, boom, he's going to bump up 2 rounds. And then if we get Chubb is looking good and confident he will be playing week 1, he's going to be a 4th rounder.
Yeah.
At least 5th.
Yeah, I would have said 5th. Yeah, 5th rounder sounds about right.
From the 4th to 6th round, he'll be. That's where he'll be drafted. I promise you.
Yeah,
yeah.
And see, before this recording with the doctor, in my mind, I was thinking they signed Foreman because they think, oh, he's probably going to be on the PUP list to start the year, and that was the meaning for signing Foreman to bring in with Ford.
But clearly, I feel like that could have been also a depth piece as well in case anything happens to Chubb. Any setbacks he may endure.
Yeah, that's firmly so. Literally, Chubb has gone from the do not draft list to drafting in every team, and Jerome Ford's not on the do not draft list, but kind of on the do not draft list.
Yeah.
At his current value, he's on the do not draft list for me.
I mean,
because
go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I don't care about cutoffs. To me, Ford is getting drafted as if Chubb is not going to be there for the first 6 games. So I don't want him at that value because that's not the case.
Yeah. I mean, we were drafting Jerome Ford last year in the last round or the last 2 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. He's being drafted as if Chubb is not going to be there week 1. So I do still I think Jerome Ford is still going to carve out a nice role in this offense. I don't think even if Nick Chubb is ready to go week 1, I'm not sure that he's going to have that type of workload that he had even throughout the entire season. So I feel like Jerome Ford could be a useful piece in this offense, but where he's being drafted right now,
it's irrelevant based on draft position.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So. Let's see. I'm trying to find where he's being drafted. It's in the same, 135 in this draft. Let's see what is.
So 2 rounds.
His ADP is he's 20 spots ahead. He's 135. Or wait, no, 2 spots. That's 20 behind. 115 to 135.
Yeah.
So he's what, end of first round or end of 11th round. I'm out on him that early, given a lot of his touches just went away. Hopefully,
yeah, we'll see how it develops throughout the offseason. If Ford drops down a couple rounds, maybe he's interesting. But Shane, what about you? What's your biggest takeaway from the interview?
I think 2 things. One was he was much more concerned with the injury to J.K. Dobbins, and he's out on J.K. Dobbins, and the Achilles is the worst injury for a running back to have, and so he's much more concerned about. It seems to me much more concerned about him being able to return and have production than even Chubb, with that injury. And then second thing was it's very early, yes, but it's maybe something not to ignore what's going on with Kyren Williams and his foot. He said he talked about multiple injuries he's had to that foot, various injuries he's had. And while it is early, if you're doing best ball drafts, it's maybe something to consider as far as when you are investing that high of draft capital in Kyren Williams right now.
Yeah, I remember him comparing it to the Antonio Gibson, how he was dealing with a lot of foot injuries, which kind of really hindered his career and his growth path. So, yeah, I found that very interesting as well. And then the first one you mentioned, talking about Deontay Foreman, right? He mentioned how Deontay Foreman, it took him almost 4 years to come back from that Achilles injury, and he still doesn't look the way he did before.
Yeah,
so,
Marlon Mack was the crazy one to me.
Marlon Mack, yeah, absolutely.
Mack.
So, yeah, JK, and he's in a situation where I feel like a lot of people may take a shot on him because they don't believe in Gus Edwards, or he's in a role where he could possibly have a comeback, but from what we hear from Dr. Jesse Morse, it just doesn't seem likely.
I also want to say, Jesse Morse is wrong at times as well. So don't think that this guy's word is the Bible.
Of course.
He plays fantasy. It's just as random for him as it is for us. Otherwise, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say there. I'm not knocking him by any means, but he's giving us a very, educated. He's giving us his background in health and sports medicine and a very educated, view of what these injuries are. But at the same time, he it's just everything
he's not seeing these players. He's not
right.
He's not working on these players and their injury.
100%.
He's not with them through their recovery. So he's not talking first-handedly, but yes, you're absolutely right.
So I want to make that very clear as well. And also that's just to the Dobbins point. I'm as staying as far away from Dobbins as anyone else. But I wouldn't necessarily completely write him off in the fact that he's pretty much a free pick. He's round 16, 17. So you're getting a free dart throw at him, and there's all the opportunity in the world in that backfield right now. So
absolutely.
I just don't want people to think because of all those names and because of his horrible draft history, you definitely should not throw a dart at him. Your probability is extremely small that he's going to thrive ever in his career, but there is literally the world of opportunity in an offense that he's in right now. So it's not like they have a piece where it's good luck even him getting any opportunity, and then you have to that is not in the way. He doesn't have to get over that obstacle of the opportunity. He will have an opportunity. Gus Edwards is not going to go in there and light the league on fire. Kamani Vidal, come on, people just the opportunity that he will have, but
and not to mention the sports medicine is evolving. We mentioned Marlon Mack, we mentioned these players, but sports medicine is evolving, and J.K. Dobbins was with Aaron Rodgers at the Achilles factory, as they called it, in his recovery process. So
the issue is more so that the Achilles is so much to do with explosiveness, which is everything for a running back. So the rehab could go fine and be a lot sooner, but once that thing snaps, that takes away a lot of the explosiveness that a running back will ever have. So that's the issue. It's not the technology and the recovery and all of that could be a lot better. It's just that Achilles is never going to be as strong and explosive. So that's that's why it's so detrimental to a running back as opposed to a quarterback who is just not juking players out or expected to explode off the line. It's not, Anthony Richardson. It's Rodgers who kind of just navigates the pocket. Sometimes he'll use his leg to extend, but for the most part, that's the big thing is that it'll never be the same. But I don't know. My point there was just like the opportunity is there. He doesn't need to overcome a ton of obstacles to get that opportunity. It's more so like, can he become can he carve out an effective role? And what would that role look like? You know, I imagine not much, but there could be a few touchdowns out there for him, and you know, maybe some third down work. Maybe he becomes a great block pass protector and ends up, you know, getting a few catches a game. We don't know. We just don't know. So
fair enough. All right. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Stay tuned. We got some dynasty wide receiver rankings coming out also this week. We have more interviews coming up, more team coverage, a lot of stuff here from the Fantasy Roadshow. So stay tuned. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on all social media. Please
subscribe to the pod.
Subscribe to the pod. The podcast is available on all platforms you get podcasts. And most importantly, everybody buckle up.